So what we're going to do is we're actually going to start, let's see, we're going to start with reviewing the assignment that you guys had to do on Monday or Tuesday. So here's the assignment. Okay, and to solve this by grouping. So we're going to solve this problem, okay? So let's do 20x cubed plus 25x plus 8 plus 10. Okay, so our steps are going to be over here. These are my Urban Note steps. So first, make sure that it's in standard form. We know that it's in standard form when we see the exponents decrease. So we see 3, we see 2, we see 1, we see 0. So step 1 is totally done. Place parentheses around the first two terms and around the last two terms. So I'm going to do this in a different color so we can follow along. Around my first two terms, 1 and 2 terms, good. And then parentheses around my last two terms. So we are done with this step. Okay. Step 3, factor out the greatest common factor from each set of parentheses. Remember, how to find your greatest common factor is we're going to start listing multiples, so 20 and 25. Okay, we list out the multiples. We get 1, 2, 4, 5, 10, and 20. For 25, we get 1, 5, and 25. We don't get too many for that one. So then we have to try to find the greatest number that they have in common. So I see that they have 5 in common. So I'm going to factor out a 5, because there's a 5 in common between these two. But then look at the exponents. We see an x3 and an x2. We always go with the smallest exponent. So we will always go with x squared, because technically this has x times x times x, and this has x times x. How many are in common? They both have at least 2 x's. So we will always do the smallest exponent. Okay? And then we have to find our remainder. So how do we find our remainder? We find our remainder by dividing it, whatever in the first parentheses, by 5x squared. So we're going to do 20 divided by 5, which gets me 4. X cubed divided by x squared. We subtract the exponents and we get x. And then we divide from here. So 25 divided by 5 gets me 5. X squared divided by x doesn't get me anything, right? That x cancels out. And then we have to find our greatest common factor here. So I'm not going to list them out, but you guys should be listing them out. But figuring out the greatest common factor from here, you're going to realize that there is a 2 in common, right? There's nothing higher than 2 that's in common with them. So then we're going to divide it. 8x divided by 2 gets me 4x. 10 divided by 2 gets me 5. Okay, so step 3, totally done. Check. All right, step 4, checkpoint. Does your remainder look the same? If not, you made a mistake. So we need to look right here. Is this the same as this? If it's not the same thing, then we need to figure out our mistake. We made a mistake somewhere. Right now, they do match. So we are done this step. Check. And then step 5, place your greatest common factors, right here and right here. Use different color. Right here and right here. And we're going to put them together. Okay, it says put them together. 5x squared plus 2. And then it says to write the remainder one time. So you see how this is the remainder? It's written twice up here, but we're only going to write it one time. Okay, and here is my final answer. Now, if you want to check your answer, because I saw a lot of you guys checked your answers from the last assignment, you're going to FOIL, right? Our friend, FOIL. So we're going to do first, outer, inner, last, and then you'll see when we do this, I'm going to do this quickly, is you will find you get the same answer as up here when I FOIL it out. Okay, so we know that this is totally the correct answer because we got the same answer as before when we tried to FOIL it. So this piece right here, that's my answer, not this. This was just to check my work. This is my answer. Okay, your answer should always be 2 sets of parentheses. Okay. Okay, so that's how your answer should look, just so that you guys are familiar with what an answer should look like when we're looking at a problem like this. It should always be 2 sets of parentheses. Okay, so now we're just going to do a couple more problems so that we can get a little bit more familiar. So here is another problem. So let me move this over so we can write it. 4r cubed plus 24r plus r plus 6. Okay, so step 1, always follow these steps in order. Step 1, make sure it's in standard form. If not, put it in standard form. So is it in standard form? We go from 3 to 1 to 2 to nothing. Does that sound like it's in standard form? It does not. So we need to put it in standard form. Make sure that we have our highest exponent first. Whoops. Have our highest exponent first, and then we're going to find our next highest, which would be R2, so we're just going to move that right over. And we don't have to change the sign, because remember, we're not moving them across a equal symbol, we're just moving them around. So it's okay to move them and keep the symbols. All right, so step 1. Good. Step 2, place parentheses around the first 2 terms and the last 2 terms. So I'm going to do that by doing this. Okay, so number 3, factor out the greatest common factor. So you need to start listing out, right, greatest common factors between 4r cubed and r squared. A 4 and a secret 1 has nothing really in common other than 1. And then r cubed and r squared have at least an r squared in common. Now, if you remember back, technically that 1 doesn't have to be written, so we could erase it if we don't want to. We could just say r squared is in common between these 2. And then we're going to find our remainder. We find our remainder by dividing. So we're going to take 4r cubed divided by r squared, and we get 4r. Then we're going to take r squared and divide it by r squared, and we realize we have nothing really left but a 1. Then we need to find our greatest common factors for here. So 24r to the first plus 6. What does it have in common? Well, it actually has 6 in common, right? 6 goes into 24, 6 goes into 6. And then we divide. So what is 24r divided by 6? We get 4r. And then 6 divided by 6 gets me plus 1, right? 6 divided by 6 gets me 1. All right, check. Now, step 4, checkpoint. Does your remainder look the same? If not, you made a mistake. So, does our remainders look alike? They certainly do. So we can move on. And remember, if they don't match exactly, you need to go back. And then 5. Place greatest common factor together and write the remainder one time. We're going to take our greatest common factors, and we're going to write them together. R squared plus 6 in one parenthesis, and then we're going to rewrite the remainders one time. It's going to be 4r plus 1. Okay, and that is our final answer. Okay, so let's try one more problem. All right, so step 1. What we're going to do for step 1, make sure that it's in standard form. So I'm going to rewrite this so that it's in standard form. Step 2, place the remainder around place parentheses around the first 2 terms and the last 2 terms. Step 3, factor out the greatest common factor. This tends to be the hardest part. Okay, so just take your time. List out all the multiples of 2, all the multiples of 12, and you'll realize that they both have a 2 in common. And then x cubed, x squared, we always use the smallest exponent that we see. So we're going to use x squared. Okay, and then we divide. 2x cubed divided by 2x squared gets me x. You can put a 1 if you want to. And then minus 12x squared divided by 2x squared gets me a minus 6. Now, from the last video, I don't know if you guys remember this, but at the last video I told you you're always going to use the sign right here. Right? Notice how we have a -3 here. This is going to come up a couple times when I give you problems. Sometimes, and for the last couple problems, it's been plus. But we don't need that plus anymore. We have a minus here. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to factor out a minus, and then whatever my greatest common factor is. So my greatest common factor here is actually 3. So you're actually going to factor out a -3. And then you're going to divide. So -3x divided by -3 gets me x. 18 divided by -3 gets me a -6. Make sure you're using that -3. Now, step 4, checkpoint. Do my remainders match? They totally do, right? Because technically there's a 1 here too, so now they match. Step 5 and last step. Bring your greatest common factors together. 2x squared minus 3. And then rewrite your remainder one time.